The sun beat down on Ilara's skin, baking the sand around her like a kiln. Her lips were cracked, her throat a desert. It had been 3 days since Lord Alistair, her husband, had rowed her to this desolate spit of land and left her with nothing but the clothes on her back. A barren field yields no harvest, he had sneered, his eyes as cold as the North Sea. You are no longer of use to me. The words echoed in her mind, a constant torment. For years she had endured his disdain, the whispered insults from his family, all because she couldn't provide him with an heir. Now she was to be a feast for the crabs and a ghost on the wind. Despair was a heavy cloak, weighing down her weary body. She closed her eyes, preparing for the end, when a glimmer caught her attention on the horizon. It was a sail, a small white speck against the vast blue. Hope, a feeling she had forgotten, surged through her veins. She staggered to her feet, waving her torn dress, screaming until her voice was raw. As the vessel drew closer, her heart sank. It wasn't a merchant ship. The black flag with the scarlet serpent unfurled in the wind, and a shiver of fear ran down her spine. The serpent's kiss. The name was whispered in every port, a legend of daring raids and fierce battles. The crew were rumoured to be as brutal as their captain, Rhys Thorne, a man said to have a heart of stone and eyes that could see through your very soul. A longboat was lowered, and a figure with broad shoulders and a dark coat stepped out, his cutlass gleaming at his side. He was tall, his face chiselled and weathered by sun and salt. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. Ilara stumbled forward, collapsing onto the sand at his feet. "Please," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. "Help me." Rhys Thorne knelt, his expression unreadable. His gaze swept over her, taking in her bruised and sunburnt skin, the desperation in her eyes. "What is your story, lass?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted her tale, the barrenness, Alistair's cruelty, the abandonment. She held nothing back, the shame and pain pouring out of her like a river. Rhys listened, his hand resting on the hilt of his cutlass, his jaw tight. When she finished, a fire seemed to ignite in his dark eyes. "A man who would cast his wife out to die for a crime she did not commit is no man at all," he said, his voice hard as iron. He stood and offered her a hand. "Come! The serpent's kiss takes no pleasure in seeing a soul perish for another's weakness." Ilara hesitated. She had heard the tales. But looking into his eyes, she saw not the monster of legend, but a weary man with a strange sense of justice. She took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet with a strength that was both intimidating and reassuring. Aboard the ship, the crew, a motley collection of rough-and-tumble sailors, looked at her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, but none were hostile. A woman named Mara, a fierce-looking quartermaster with a sharp wit, gave her water and a clean shirt. "Captain Thorne doesn't suffer cruelty, not when he's seen enough of it," Mara said, her eyes softening slightly as she saw the fear in Ilara's. "You're safe now, lass, at least from the sea and the sun." Ilara looked back at the receding island, a place of her despair. She was no longer a barren wife. She was something else now, an unknown, a woman on a pirate ship, sailing into a future she never could have imagined. But the shadow of Alistair loomed, a wealthy and powerful man who would not let a loose end like her float away. He would come for her, not out of love, but out of a sense of possession. She knew it in her bones, and for the first time, she had someone to fight for her. Life on the Serpent's Kiss was unlike anything Ilara had ever known. She learned to mend sails, to plot a course using the stars, and to tell a good sea shanty from a bad one. Rhys, while often reserved, would spend hours with her on the quarterdeck, teaching her about the constellations and the winds. He spoke of his own past in hushed tones, of a noble family that prized wealth over honor, of a system he saw as rotten to its core. He had chosen this life not for greed but for freedom, a fight against the very men who had wronged her. Their bond grew in the quiet moments. She saw the lines of worry on his face when a storm hit, the way he treated his crew not as servants, but as equals. He saw her resilience, her intelligence, and her quiet strength. He had rescued a woman left to die, and in return, she had brought a light to his weary soul. One evening, as they sat on the deck, the stars like scattered diamonds above them, Rhys turned to her. "I know what they'll say of me. Of us," he began, his voice low, "that I've taken a noble woman as a prize." Ilara shook her head. "You didn't take me, Rhys. You saved me." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I'm not a man who can offer you a life of comfort, Ilara, only a life of freedom, a life where you are your own person, not someone's property." It was then that she realized he wasn't just offering her a future on his ship. He was offering her a life with him. The thought terrified and thrilled her. She had been owned her entire life, a possession to be used and discarded. To be seen as a person, to be loved for who she was a new and overwhelming sensation. Their fragile new world was shattered one morning by the cry from the crow's nest. "Sail on the port bow! Royal Navy, Sir Alistair's flag!" The blood drained from Ilara's face. He had come for her, not to save her, but to reclaim what he saw as his. He wanted to parade her back, broken and humiliated, as a trophy of his power. Rhys's expression hardened. "He will not have you," Rhys said, his voice a low growl. "He'll have to go through us." The chase was on. The Royal Navy vessel, faster and more heavily armed, bore down on them. Cannonballs sliced through the air, sending splinters flying. The Serpent's Kiss was a small ship, but it was fast and its crew was experienced. They used the shallow reefs and hidden coves to their advantage, weaving through the treacherous waters that would trap a larger ship. During the chaos, a rogue wave slammed into the ship, knocking Ilara to the deck. A coil of rope, loosened by the impact, swung dangerously toward her. Before she could react, Rhys was there, his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her out of harm's way, just as the rope whipped past where her head had been. He held her tight for a moment, his chest heaving. The fear in her eyes was reflected in his. "Stay below, Ilara," he commanded, his voice raw with urgency. "Stay out of harm's way." But she refused. "I am not a damsel in distress, Rhys. I will help." She grabbed a bucket and started bailing water from the deck. She helped Mara with the rigging, and she handed ammunition to the men manning the cannons. She was not a prisoner or a guest. She was part of the crew. She was part of their fight. This was her freedom, and she would fight for it. The chase ended in a narrow, fog-shrouded passage. The Royal Navy ship, too large and unwieldy, was forced to slow down, giving the Serpent's Kiss the chance they needed to escape. The crew let out a cheer, but Rhys's expression was grim. "He won't give up," Rhys said, looking back at the fog where Alistair's ship had disappeared. "He'll hunt us to the ends of the earth." But as he looked at Ilara, a new resolve settled on his face. He would not let his past, or her past, define their future. He had found a treasure far more valuable than any gold coin, and he would protect it with his life. A week passed, and the Serpent's Kiss found a hidden cove on a remote island to make repairs. The tranquility was a stark contrast to the chaos of the chase. Ilara and Rhys walked along the beach, the sand soft beneath their feet. "He sent the Royal Navy after me," Ilara said, the reality of it finally sinking in. "He wants me back for the scandal, not for me." Rhys stopped and turned to face her. "He sees you as a wound to his pride, not a person. But I see you, Ilara. I see a woman of incredible courage, a woman who deserves to choose her own fate." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, carved wooden seahorse. "My mother gave me this. It was a good luck charm. She used to say that the sea protects those who are true to their own hearts." He handed it to her. "I want you to have it. I want you to know that you are no longer alone. We are in this together." Ilara looked at the seahorse, then at him, her eyes welling up. This simple act of giving, of trust, meant more to her than any jewel. He wasn't just a rescuer. He was her partner. "Rhys," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I want to marry you, not as a prize, but as a wife, a true wife, your partner in this life." His eyes widened, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile she had rarely seen. He took her hands in his. "Then it shall be so. On this island, with the sea as our witness, I, Rhys Thorne, take you, Ilara, to be my wife." They exchanged vows in a simple, heartfelt ceremony on the beach, with Mara and the crew as their witnesses. There were no priests, no fancy clothes, only the gentle lapping of the waves and the silent promise of a future forged by their own hands. Their peace was short-lived. A scout from the ship came running to them. "Captain, we have a problem. Lord Alistair's ship is in the bay. He's found us." Alistair had tracked them down. He had cornered them in the cove. The odds were against them, but this was no longer a fight for survival. This was a fight for their new life, for their freedom. The battle that ensued was fierce. The Serpent's Kiss was outnumbered, but they knew the terrain. Rhys and his crew fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Ilara, no longer a helpless noblewoman, fought alongside them, reloading cannons, and even wielding a cutlass against one of Alistair's men who had boarded their ship. The man, a brutish sailor, advanced on her, but before he could reach her, Mara drove her cutlass through his side. "No one touches the captain's wife," Mara spat, her eyes gleaming with loyalty. As the battle raged, Rhys found himself face to face with Lord Alistair on the deck of his own ship. Alistair's eyes were filled with venomous rage. "You thought you could steal my property, you wretched pirate?" he snarled, raising his sword. "She was never your property," Rhys countered, blocking his attack. "She is a free woman." Their swords clashed, a symphony of steel on steel. Rhys fought not just with skill, but with the righteous anger of a man defending his family. Alistair, blinded by his own arrogance and pride, was no match for him. With a final, powerful thrust, Rhys disarmed him, his sword point resting against Alistair's throat. "Consider this a lesson, Alistair," Rhys said, his voice low and dangerous. "A man's worth is not in what he owns, but in who he protects. And from this day forward, you protect no one. Your tyranny ends here." They didn't kill him. They left him on a deserted part of the island, a taste of his own medicine. Alistair's ship, now with a rebellious crew who had witnessed his cowardice, turned on him and sailed away, leaving him to contemplate his actions. As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow over the sea, Ilara and Rhys stood on the deck of the Serpent's Kiss, hand in hand. She looked at him, her heart filled with a love she never thought she'd feel. She was no longer Ilara, the barren wife. She was Ilara Thorne, a pirate's wife, a free woman, a partner. She had faced death and found not just survival, but a life she truly wanted. "So," Rhys said, his arm around her, "where to now, my wife?" Ilara smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. "Anywhere you go, Rhys, as long as it's together." The Serpent's Kiss sailed on, the scarlet serpent on its flag, a symbol not of fear, but of rebellion and freedom. They were two souls who had been abandoned by the world, but had found a new one together on the open sea with a crew that was now their family.